Thank you all for coming and welcome to the Museum of Modern Art in Paris, the Ral de Fille Room. This mural depicts the history of electricity, 110 of the innovators who created the energy system that we have today. As Bill Gates recently reminded us, Thomas Edison, who's behind us, would have recognized today's energy system, electricity system, because it is very similar to what is painted on these walls in 1937. And we should surprise him, perhaps, with our future innovation. So this remarkable innovation, this miracle of electricity, is no longer fit for purpose. It's operating at too high an environmental and economic cost, and it still fails to reach 1 billion people or more on the planet who need access to energy, and that's today. Climate change is the unintended consequence of the energy system that was set in motion over a century ago. So why Energy Unlocked? We are launching Energy Unlocked tonight because climate change is an economic problem. It needs economic solutions. Let's face it, there are still many companies in the world that make money burning fossil fuels. That's how our economies are incentivized. And if we hope to tackle climate change, we need to change the incentives. So what is Energy Unlocked going to do about this? What do we do? We are a market builder. We are here to ensure that the companies and the innovative business models that are today outcompeting fossil fuels are not locked out of the energy system because of the policies that were created to support this system of the past. So we are here to ensure that there's a level playing field. How do we do this? We create market challenges that set the competitive conditions to meet the most renewable, most resilient, most low carbon outcomes and allow companies to compete to deliver those outcomes. These challenges allow us to be much more targeted in our policy advocacy and the energy market redesign that we will advocate for. So we believe we need to embrace disruptive innovation and disruptive innovators that find new customers, create new markets with ideas that no one had thought of before. Steve Jobs would say he's, giving people things that they never knew they wanted. And these disruptors are here tonight. We'll first hear from Nancy Fund, who's an investor who has invested in SolarCity and Tesla, early investor in those companies. We'll hear from 2 of the disruptive companies that are operating in the UK and in India to do in those very particular contexts to bring the best solutions to most people. And we'll hear from an innovative, ambitious subnational government that needs disruptive innovators in order to achieve their goals. But first, I'm going to introduce Jim Walker. Mark Kember, the CEO of the Climate Group, unfortunately had to leave because he always triple books everything. And of course, we were slightly delayed getting started. Apologies for that. So Jim Walker founded the Climate Group with Steve Howard 12 years ago, and he's also an advisor to Energy Unlocked, and he's going to say a few words. Jim.
Thanks very much, Molly. It's really great to be here today and be surrounded by so many innovators in the energy system. And as Molly said, I think we're also surrounded on the walls by energy innovators through the ages. And you'll notice that we're very strategically positioned in this corner because we start there in the beginning of time, working around to here, up to Thomas Edison right behind us, and then actually something wonderful happens around this point in the painting where we get some sun, some wind, and an orchestra of people working together. And I think that's actually very fitting for the challenge that Energy Unlocked is looking to fill. As Molly said, I've been working on the Climate Group now for 12 years. We've been consistently trying to innovate and introduce and spin out new ideas that can help to unlock new innovation in the energy system. It's been great to be working with Molly for the last 10 years. She was part of a really instructive and I think groundbreaking report a number of years ago called Smart 2020, which looked at the role for ICT, for energy innovation and information innovation to work together to create major decarbonisation opportunities in the system. And I very much see Energy Unlocked as part of the next step in that journey, looking at how does private sector innovation working with government help us to unlock and innovate a whole new energy system. It was something that Thomas Edison actually was famously very good at. He was able to innovate a whole energy system in the introduction of the electric light bulb, had to move from gas-fired lighting to electric lighting, didn't have to just create the products, but had to actually move the whole system forwards. And I think we're at another point in time now where that kind of system innovation is very much needed, and there's a huge opportunity there. In the last 10 years, we've seen the private sector increasingly step up. If any of you are following the work of We Mean Business, which is a coalition of proactive businesses that the Climate Group is part of, we currently have about 350 major companies, 170 plus investors turning up here to Paris with more than 700 major commitments on leadership on climate change. That's a groundbreaking step forwards for the private sector. What we're increasingly seeing, though, is that there's lots of smaller innovators out there that are really driving this agenda forwards. And we feel that they've been missing from the dialogue up until now. And I think what Energy Unlocked can do is to create this orchestra with all of you in the room, the orchestra that's going to do what Thomas Edison did many years ago, which is to work together to innovate the next energy system, which looks very different to the energy system that Thomas Edison would recognize. So I'm really delighted to be here to kick this off as a partner in Energy Unlocked. And I'm going to hand back to Molly. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And now I'd like to introduce Nancy Fund from DBL Partners. Nancy Fund is a pioneer who has been working for, well, 12 years with DBL Partners, but before that, she was doing impact investing before it was called impact investing. And she is here tonight to share some of her vision of the future of energy. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on the launching of Energy Unlocked, Molly, and your team. It's been a real pleasure to work with you, and it's always great to have another group that understands the power of innovation to help us solve the challenge of climate change. And so what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes, and I hope we'll have a chance to have Q&A and dialogue and hear from what I'm sure is a very, very talented and committed audience. But I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about the role of venture capital in helping to create that disruption to allow for a clean energy future. And I think most people understand now that venture capital is all about disruption. That's really how we are able to move from the past to the future and change the dominance of incumbents to new entrants. And basically, most of the products and services that we can't live without today, like your phone, like Twitter, like Google, those innovations all came from venture-backed companies. And so it really is a powerful tool to move society forward in a lot of different ways. What's happening now is that this disruption, this advancement is happening in energy, finally. We have companies like Tesla, we have SolarCity, Nest, there's a whole new crop of companies that are disrupting centuries-old incumbents, and this is how we're giving us both power and convenience in our fight against climate change. So what's a little bit different is that as we are developing these new companies, we we don't quite recognize it the way we recognize moving from, those old-fashioned cell phones that were heavy and expensive to a smartphone. I mean, we all lived through some portion of that, but we don't recognize it as much in energy because energy has just stayed the same for 100 years. And, it really still is our grandfather's electricity system that we've been using. And so we're not used to change in this sector. And that's why this is a little more, perhaps, challenging to get this disruption going, because we don't have the experience that we've had in music or radio or computers or telephones that to go by. But that is changing. And one statistic I'd like to give you is just let's compare Tesla and General Motors, two automobile companies. General Motors is 100 years old. I think it was founded in 1907, and obviously is one of the leading car companies. Tesla is about 10 years old, a little over 10 years old. And so in the 10 years that Tesla has been around, it has today over half the market capitalization of General Motors. Market capitalization is really the stock value of a company, the shares outstanding times the price, which is an indicator of what people view as the future value of an industry and of companies within an industry. So it's a really important metric. And the fact that in 10 years, a company like Tesla has achieved half the market cap of a 100-year-old dominant player is just stunning. This is something that hasn't happened in energy. And there are other examples I could give you, but it's a really important statistic that is, in many ways, it's a postcard from the future. This is going to continue to happen. You're going to get more names there, and eventually you'll see a rearrangement of the old and the new. Some will no longer be around, both new and old companies, and then some will stay and reinvent themselves. So this is something that really enables us to unlock the power of the markets to help us fight the climate change challenge. And so what I see is that the companies, such as the ones I've mentioned, they are really this industry is developing the iconic 21st century versions of 20th century names like GE and Daimler and other names that we've all grown up with. But they're 20th century names. They're fossil-based or they're centralized. They're not what we want to live with now. And so we're in some ways passing the baton to a low-carbon, cleaner energy future when we reallocate our resources from the old to the new. And really, what are these companies capturing? They are capturing a newfound consumer preference for mobile, for transparency, for anywhere, anytime, for choice, for personalization. These are the dominant themes of our age, and we see them in many products that we use. But again, we've never seen them in energy until now. And what you get when you, I never even used to know where my meter was on my house 12 years ago. I'm embarrassed to say that. But talk about lack of transparency. Today we're shifting. People not only know about their electricity, but increasingly they don't even just want to know where their electricity comes from. They want to insist that it not come from certain sources. And we don't all have the power to do that yet. Like we do in choosing our radio stations and such. So that's something that is happening with this new crop of companies. And what I call it is what we're entering is the age of kind of a no-sacrifice approach to energy. And that means no sacrifice on performance of the product or service, no sacrifice on cost. We're seeing costs be very competitive with wind and solar, and they will be increasingly competitive with storage. No sacrifice on coolness, on functionality, and then no sacrifice on climate protection and enhancement, actually. And that combination is a winner in any market that you want to play in, because that's where we are today. That's what consumers want. They don't settle for not having those choices. They vote with their wallet and with their purchases, and they want that increasing choice and transparency. So this all adds up to a pretty messy situation sometimes, because when you're trying to change an industry that hasn't changed for a long time, the reaction there's two reactions. One is the incumbents try to squash the new entrants through their lobbying power, through their control of distribution, through lots of ways. And then the second is that they try to adapt and find themselves in a new world where the chairs have been rearranged. I would say that we're not quite at that point where all of the chairs have been rearranged. There will be companies that, both old and new, that won't survive, and then there will be ones that can grow and force the industry to rearrange. But there is a way forward, and what's making me really optimistic is to see that we're getting beyond some of the acrimony and moving towards shared solutions. And so when I think about what we all need to do, it has to do with standing up and helping this transformation happen, because there are barriers, be they the incumbents I've been talking about, or policy, or ignorance, but there are also incredibly inspiring opportunities. And I just want to leave you with one example. We started Tesla when we were in Tesla in Solar City. It was very local. We never really thought it would work out so well. We didn't know how bold and big it was all going to be at the time. And yet now we're able to take the learnings from business models, from technology cost curves that we've used in the developed world, and obviously we're still just early days, but already we can take those learnings and address the big opportunity / problem, which is the 1.3 billion people on this planet that don't even have access to reliable electricity. Many of those living in sub-Saharan Africa and India and other places. And in 2015, almost 2016, we just can't support that. We need to bring these areas, bring the folks there into the middle class. And so folks like me and a whole new group of investors are investing in companies that are doing just that. They're going to take the learnings from what we've been building in the developed world and bring clean distributed electricity to places in the world where kerosene and inferior solutions have kept people back. And in the process, we'll build a big part of the world, where we'll see a middle class and we'll see an increase in health and standard of living, all of which are amazing benefits to be had that go beyond even the ability and the urgency of fighting climate change. I don't know if he's here, but one company we just invested in, Off-Grid Electric, is doing just what I described in Tanzania, and so we're really excited about that. I could go on and on about all the entrepreneurs out there, because this field is attracting the best and the brightest. It is aspirational. It is what people want to be when they grow up. They don't want to be but the part of the past. They want to be part of the future. And I believe that working together, we can make this happen in a way that's in time to make a difference and make the world livable and sustainable and most importantly, worth living in. And I appreciate all of you being here on a Friday night, and I know that you're all working in important ways to enable this transformation. And I look forward to the day where we can celebrate and move on to the next level of quality of life and protection of our planet together. So thank you very much for having me today.
so much, Nancy. It's so inspiring to hear you, and I think you and the other investors and the disruptors that you're talking about, the companies you invest in, create this urgency and set a pace for change that is very refreshing if we've been working on the climate change world for many, many years. So thank you. And we have two of these disruptors and innovators on stage tonight, and I'm going to introduce Sarah Bell, the CEO of Tempus Energy, also its founder. And Sarah is on a mission to create a company that outcompetes the existing incumbents, and she is ready to spread that vision around the world. She also had the vision to launch an organization that focused on these issues in this room over a year ago, and she is the founding chair of Energy Unlocked, and it is my very great pleasure to introduce Sarah Bell.
Thank you, Molly. And thank you all very much for attending tonight. Some of you may be wondering why this event is being hosted by a UK startup. Even though we're a small company, we are outcompeting every other electricity supplier in the UK because we have systematically innovated to a lower cost base. It's action that counts. We founded Tempus Energy as a technology company. The existing energy companies wouldn't use our technology because it disaggregated their fossil fuel generation units. So we entered the market as a supplier ourselves, and we are lowering the value of their assets. Last week, we bought power at minus £60 a megawatt hour. I think you can imagine the price that we can charge customers with those sorts of market conditions. While we're staying here in Paris, the Tempus staff are staying in Airbnb apartments, and when we're not walking or using the metro, we're using Uber. Two innovation companies that enable us to operate at a lower cost base and outcompete even more. Every time we lower our customers' energy bills, we empower them to more aggressively compete in their fields. The countries that align their policy frameworks to maximize the economic development benefit from business models to benefit from the transition from business models that cause climate change to those that make money out of resolving climate change, those countries are the ones we're going to want to live in the future. Today is the one-year anniversary of Tempus lodging a legal action in the European courts challenging the state aid approval for the UK capacity market on competition grounds. As innovators, we need to work very hard to be smarter, faster, better. But at the same time, when the odds are illegally stacked against us, we need to stand up and say no. Our legal challenge is about having the courage to say no to illegal fossil fuel subsidies and the courage to say yes to innovative ways of creating resilient energy systems. Last night at an event I was at, a representative from the oil and gas industry asked the room how they might attract young talent into their industry in the future. Good luck with that. Young people want good opportunities that don't endanger their very future. And that gives innovators the opportunity to attract the brightest of the bright, as Nancy just said, and the most creative young people, and that further enhances our ability to outcompete. I came here to this room last year in October with my daughter. I thought immediately that this was the perfect room to launch an organization to accelerate the energy transition. My daughter, who's 14, commented at the time that there was only one woman in the painting. And she said that when the equivalent painting is painted for her generation, it's going to be full of women. I intend to hold her to that. In this painting, in this painting, there are some extraordinary men. Men like Edison, who said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. All the innovators in the room are committed to doing the work that's required to outcompete. And that's technical work, commercial work, and regulatory hard work. Alexander Graham Bell, a distant relation, I'm sure, said, sometimes we stare so long at a door that is closing that we see too late the door that is open. I could go on. The people in the painting performed extraordinary feats of human ingenuity. They changed the way we live and work, and they kick-started industrial revolutions. They pulled people out of poverty and enabled us to achieve things that we never dreamt were possible. We must take inspiration from their intent and get on with accelerating the transition to energy business models that don't cause climate change by outcompeting those that do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Very inspirational. The disruptors often come from other sectors where they've had successful careers. Sarah comes from the finance industry, and Anil Raj, who's on stage tonight, is another disruptor who comes from the telecommunications industry. That industry, wireless telecommunications, of course, leapfrogged fixed-line communications. And what Anil Raj is doing in India is actually double leapfrogging. He is able to provide access to energy via the mobile telecommunications industry and reaching people without the grid infrastructure that we're accustomed to in the West. And I'm very pleased to announce that, or to welcome the visionary Anil Raj to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. That's I have to live up to that introduction now. Yeah, so I have to start by saying I feel a complete imposter, actually. I'll come back to that. So 2 days ago, I was sitting under a mango tree in a village very far away, discussing product pricing with some village elders, and now we're here sipping champagne. And if this is the climate change business, I want to be in it. So I work for OMC Power. It's a company that I started with some friends 4 years ago. And we're a power company. Incidentally, we happen to be a renewably clean energy company, not by design, really, but solar happened to be the cheapest source of energy. And, heresy, I'll say that. If it was cheaper to burn coal or diesel, we would have done that. Because for a business to be sustainable, it has to generate a profit. And finding a long-term solution starts with, something which has to be financially sustainable. OMC Power, we are an energy company in a very old industry, as we've heard, and nothing's really changed, since Edison designed the first DC network, Tesla the first AC network. We have the grid, and we have very large power plants which pump energy into this grid, and we're consumers who use that energy. This architecture really has been unchanged for since this industry started, and we're actually on the cusp. We're in between two architectures. That's the way we see it, and unfortunately, we're trying to fit a whole bunch of new technologies into the old architecture. We have things like photovoltaic panels, we have things like, the lithium-ion batteries and so on. These belong to a new, different architecture, not to the old grid architecture. That's the point that we're making. So OMC Power finances, builds, owns, and operates power plants. And we want to be the biggest distributed power company in the world. Of the more than 1 billion people who lack energy today, we're lucky to have 400 million of them actually in India, which is a great captive market. The problem, the other side of the opportunity, is that it's difficult for investors, it's difficult for venture capitalists, for banks, for funds to qualify this risk. Most of our customers have no address, have no social security number, don't own a credit card, yet they're, in our experience, extremely creditworthy. Now, traditional ways of assessing a risk can't be used here. And what's that causing is it's difficult for companies like ourselves to get access to financing unless, it's some very forward-leaning investor who understands this. Again, this is a question of market maturity, and there will be hundreds of companies like ours. We're confident, we're sure of that, because that really is the only way we can solve the energy problems of these 1.5 billion people today. Building large coal and oil-fired power plants is not going to solve the problem. It's the cheapest and fastest way is to build small, distributed, renewable energy power plants, and which is what we're doing today. There's a lot of frustration about regulators, the unfair subsidies, which skew market, which skew customer behaviors. With some of my telecom experience using that perspective, that is always the case. No one's written the book on renewable energy. It is being written right now, by yourselves, by us. Regulators don't have all the answers. They're learning as well. So I think, the intentions are good all around. Certainly from our market in India, we think we have only good words to say, but the government wants to, of course, have a policy which promotes clean energy and combats climate change. The regulators want to make sure, of course, that companies like ourselves are given an equal chance in competition with the incumbents and distribution companies. But the road there is not always straight. It's a learning process, but we'll get there. We're 100% confident of that. So I think the sense I have really is, if I go back to my former job in the telecom business, where we are today in the energy business is like the telecom industry was in the late 80s and early 90s, where cell phones were, as big as briefcases. We will get to these distributed energy solutions with Teslas or similar, power walls, batteries, and so on. It's early days yet. There's a lot of technology revolution which is going to happen. Moore's law applies to silicon, applies to solar cells. We've seen, the journey that the price per watt is made in photovoltaics. The next big revolution is going to be in storage. And really, I think, from our perspective, this is a fantastic place to be. A great business. A little difficult for investors to understand, perhaps, but the opportunity is very, very large. And we are very optimistic and positive. Thank you.
Anil, thank you very much. Governments get the last word. We have a number of innovative subnational governments in the room who the Climate Group have worked with over the years. I didn't mention, well, Jim mentioned that I had worked with the Climate Group as well, but we have one here tonight, Scotland, and Dr. McLeod, who is the climate change minister, environment minister for Scotland. And Scotland is a low-carbon powerhouse. They lead Europe in their ambition to be 100% renewables, not in 20 or 30 years, but in the next 5 years. And they are, I read this on the internet and they haven't confirmed, so it could be not true, but I hear Orkney is already generating 110% of its electricity from renewables, and that they have a high ratio of electric vehicles to per capita. And so it's with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. MacLeod.
Well, thank you very much, Molly, for that very kind introduction. And first of all, I would just like to say how absolutely thrilled I am to be here at the launch of Energy Unlocked. And this is exactly the kind of initiative that we need to see more of. And I'm, absolutely delighted to be able to give my support to this tonight. And I must say, it's an absolutely fantastic venue as well for tonight's launch. Now, I've been invited here tonight to speak about Scotland's low carbon journey, and I feel it is an important story for me to share with you all this evening. Now, back in 2009, Scotland's Parliament acted unilaterally to set world-leading emission reduction targets, aiming for a 42% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 and 80% by 2050, and that is compared to our 1990 levels. And I'm delighted to say that we are over 3/4 of the way to meeting our world-leading 2020 emission reduction target of 42% compared to our 1990 levels, having reduced our greenhouse gas emissions in 2013 by 38.4%, which is far greater than the 31.7% that was originally anticipated. Now, our legislation, that was designed, to provide certainty for our businesses and the public about Scotland's low-carbon future. And our low-carbon transition, that is an absolutely key priority in our government's economic strategy. And across Scotland, we are benefiting from an estimated 45,000 low-carbon and environmental service jobs. So all the evidence from Scotland shows that the low-carbon transition, it delivers investment, it delivers jobs, it delivers trade, and it delivers economic growth. And the energy sector in Scotland also has a lot to be proud of. And our renewable electricity output, that has risen threefold in 10 years, and the equivalent now of half of our entire electricity use is met by renewables. So in total, we now have 7.4 gigawatts, of installed renewable generation capacity from a range of renewable sources. On energy demand, we've achieved a 13.3% reduction against a 2005 to 2007 baseline, and already over our 12% target figure and well in advance of our target date of 2020. And that isn't all, because this year we also hit our community and locally owned renewable energy target 5 years ahead of schedule. We now have over 500 megawatts of capacity across nearly 12,000 individual installations. Now that target will be worth up to £2.2 billion in revenue over the lifetime of these projects and schemes, and that will help to transform many of our local communities across Scotland. And that's because of projects like the Point in Shetland, the Point in Shanwick, which is a community-owned wind farm on the Isle of Lewis in the far north of Scotland. And that's at 9 megawatts. That is the biggest of its kind in the UK, and we expect it to be operational later this year. And that will generate around £1 million a year for a local community. And the people what's fantastic about this is the very fact that the people there on the Isle of Lewis, they will be able to decide for themselves how to spend it. Whether that's to support employment, improve facilities in the local community, or increase tourism. But I think what it does show, ladies and gentlemen, is just how our local energy systems can transform our communities that go, in ways that just go far beyond energy in itself. And that kind of project, it only happens because of the tenacity and the ambition of the people involved. But the right support, the right support is also absolutely crucial. You've got private bodies like Santander and public bodies like our Scottish Enterprise who deliver our Renewable Energy Investment Fund, and of course our Community and Renewable Energy Scheme also have a very important part to play. So now, it is crucial. It's crucial for us that the strategic grid links to our islands are delivered to allow the islands to be able to reach their full potential. Now, Scotland, we've always been at the forefront of offshore wind research and development, and we are determined, absolutely, that we continue to developing floating offshore wind, which can help us to take advantage of our offshore wind resource, as well as further reducing our costs. Now, just last month, we granted consent for the world's largest floating offshore wind site off the coast of Peterhead. And the eyes of the world, we know that they are on the Maygen project, which is the world's largest planned tidal array development. And it's the first of a kind project which has received over £23 million of support from the Scottish public sector. So I'm sure, and I'm hoping that you will agree that Scotland has much to be proud of, but we do still face challenges. But our ambitions as a government, they are set out in our 2013 electricity generation policy statement to largely decarbonise our electricity grid by 2030, to greatly enhance our community renewables, and also to have a balanced generation mix that is unchanged. But we are now looking to develop a new overarching energy strategy for Scotland, and our priorities for that work will be to first of all develop a whole system view and a holistic policy prescription that will consider energy supply and end use, encompassing our demand reduction, energy efficiency, transport and heat use. Secondly, to optimise the benefits to Scotland's communities, our consumers and our businesses, recognising energy's contribution to Scotland's competitiveness, our sustainable growth, and in tackling our inequalities, including fuel poverty. And also, just finally, is about making our national energy strategy a local energy strategy, aggregating that supply and demand at the local level to create the new models of energy provision that much permit a greater community stake in our energy system. So our overall vision will be to reduce the overall energy demand in the system in the first place, further addressing our household fuel poverty and helping to reduce costs to improve the competitiveness of our businesses and energy-intensive industries and the efficiency of our public sector. Now, we know that we need more local heat generation and supply. We need more energy storage at transmission, distribution and household levels, and we have many of the building blocks in place. Now, in June, Scottish ministers designated energy efficiency of all Scotland's buildings as a national infrastructure priority. And Scotland's energy efficiency programme, that will build on the substantial investment that the Scottish Government has already made and will improve the energy performance of all of our buildings in Scotland over a 15 to a 20-year period. And meanwhile, our local energy challenge fund is investing over £20 million in major demonstrator projects to showcase the value of local energy economies with multi-technology supply linked directly to our local demand. But what is not in any doubt, however, is that, Scotland we have vast resources for our energy. Per head of population, we are the most energy-rich nation in the EU. And of course, all of this, is vitally important in the context of the COP21. And with negotiations progressing, we in the Scottish Government, we very much hope that it will be a big step forward and that other countries can match and that they will match Scotland's ambition in the years ahead. And a clear signal from Paris will provide that certainty about a global low-carbon future, just as we did in Scotland in 2009. So post-Paris, a progressive agenda will be driven by our non-state actors such as devolved state and regional governments like Scotland, along with our cities, our businesses and our public. And in that context, I very much believe that initiatives, like Energy Unlocked will, aim to unlock that innovation that is required to solve the global energy, trilemma will be absolutely invaluable. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really do genuinely want to wish Molly and the rest of the team, good luck and my very best wishes. And certainly I look forward to hearing more, about the innovation that will be unlocked as a result of their work. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here tonight and to speak about Scotland's experience. And I look forward to continuing to work with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there a roving microphone? Can we take this one off? Roving mic? We have mic. You have a mic? I don't know if it will clash with this one. We are going to allow a few questions from the audience. We don't have too much time because we started late, and I would really like everyone to be able to talk in the room. We have as many innovators and pioneers in the room tonight, I think, as we have on the stage, which is very unusual. And I would also, let's see, does anyone know where Rachel Kite is? We are waiting for Rachel Kite.
We know her. We know her.
Okay. She's being held up. Fine. So we'll take a couple of questions, and it's very difficult to see from up here. Am I going to use the mic?
There's one here. Okay.
Jacob.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Jacob Scher with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I want to thank all of you for really interesting discussions. I wanted to see if I could get a reaction from some of you to the big announcement on Monday that was made by Bill Gates along with President Obama and President Hollande about creating a multi-billion-dollar fund to assist to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon, clean energy future, and particularly dealing with this problem of the valley of death. And I'd be very interested in people's reaction to it.
Thank you very much. I might try and pass this so you don't have to get up to the microphone. Would anyone like to respond?
I think we're all very excited about the announcement. It isn't that unpredicted because what we have been seeing, we just raised our third fund after several years where clean tech was kind of in trouble and it was politicized and that whole Solyndra era that we are, thank God, far beyond. The industry went through a tough period and there wasn't enough capital, but because there have been successes and through policy like we've heard tonight and through innovation in some of the companies represented here and in other portfolios, people are finally beginning to recognize that the solution lies in innovation coupled with good policy and that we've been underinvesting. And so we're thrilled to have these new players because there's obviously a lot more to do.
I would completely agree with what Nancy has said. Investors are becoming more and more interested in this space because I think there's a recognition that out of these new innovation companies, that the value is going to come from those companies. Investing in an existing fossil fuel company where we're seeing values go down and down, that investment no longer makes sense. So the more we have competitive business models that are aggressively outcompeting, the more we're going to attract investment into this sector. And this announcement, I think, is a good sign of that.
I would just like to say I also very much welcome it. The challenges that we are undertaking at Energy Unlocked aim to be much more focused on current market conditions, but I welcome the kinds of announcements, also the X Prize Foundation, who are in the room tonight, who are applying these innovative processes to trying to get more investment and backing in what has been not invested in for 50 or 60 years. So the basic R&D hasn't been there. But we do think that even without new technological breakthroughs, some of the innovations that are coming in the demand side that we've heard about tonight and in storage are able to be accelerated even under existing market conditions, and we can pave the way for those with some changes now. Just, we have, is that Dan?
Thank you very much. Dan Hamza Goodacre from the ClimateWorks Foundation. I think the first thing I'd say is thank you very much to the panelists, because it's just such an inspiring discussion and really shows some of the innovation and perspiration that's required to take us in the direction we want to go in, particularly when one compares it to what's actually really going on in the negotiations right now as we get into the end of week one, which is increasingly painful. So my question is this: the COP21 needs to send a signal to the world that the low carbon economy is irresistible, inevitable, and what's the last word? Irresistible. Did I say
Inevitable.
that?
Irrevocable.
Okay. Lost my strap line. Apart from that signal, when it comes to what's being increasingly talked about as a regime, how important is COP21 to the continued success of your endeavors and others like it?
Anyone? Doctor?
I mean, all I would just say is, absolutely, from a Scottish perspective, and also because I talked about in my own remarks, is, one of the things that we're very keen to see is not only for our high ambition to be matched by the international community, but I think, key is also having that certainty, so that businesses have that certainty in the same way as what we did back in 2009 with the climate change legislation, was to give, our businesses that confidence as well in terms of trying to encourage greater, innovation and investment. So we need to see that from the COP.
Anil, do you have the same view?
Thanks. I can offer a slightly different perspective. I think from the perspective of the developing markets, what's important about COP21 is, this is the input that industry and regulators in developing markets need. What do I mean with that? Climate change is something we see on TV, we discuss every day. This is not the case in most developing economies. This is not, headline news in India or China. These countries are just, speaking of India, other countries, they're trying to get out of, their chronic poverty, and there are 1,000 other issues, social injustice. So climate change is not on the agenda. What this does, I think, is it puts it there, because, suddenly this issue is so important that, the rest of the world is gathered around to discuss this. It must have impact on these countries as well. So I think, from my perspective, that really is the most important thing, because it's the changes made by these economies, ultimately, which is going to have the most impact, because that's where most people are.
I'm a little cynical, I'm afraid. I started off on the expert group of the UK capacity market as a fairly optimistic person. By the end of that policy development, I was definitely much more cynical. A big part of what we're doing at Tempest, the reason why we are focused on delivering the lowest cost solution to customers, is because it's a compelling proposition. When you can deliver to customers at the lowest possible cost while still solving climate change, it's a complete no-brainer. Still, no customer has said no to me. And it's not because I'm such a good saleswoman. it's because the proposition is compelling. There will be far more success out of creating financially, economically compelling propositions that solve climate change than any of the discussions that are going on here today, in my humble opinion.
Any last words?
Well, I guess I can understand, sure, there's so much momentum that, and as we've heard, subnationals are making a huge stride forward, and a lot of this is all about local governments working with innovators and such. So I think we will have progress if things don't go well here, but I mean, obviously, I mean, we need a shot in the arm big time to fight these battles, and there's a lot of work ahead, and so we do need a clear, strong, decisive signal, and I think particularly in the developing world that will help immeasurably. So I wouldn't underestimate just the power of the collective will applying itself to this in a very concerted and meaningful way.
I'm going to wrap up because I would like everyone to have the opportunity to talk amongst themselves. We have been talking about climate change as an economic problem, so I think the international negotiations, if they send a clear signal, do have an effect on the confidence of investors and companies and young people in solving these problems, because they are solvable. And as we talk about an economic problem, I'm struck because it does not feel like the dismal science when we hear from these voices on stage. It feels passionate and furious and courageous and very tenacious, and I think that's what we need if we're going to rewrite or draw the next panel in this amazing mural. And as we look around here one more time, the challenges we would like to run, deal or no deal in COP, would set the conditions of low carbon, zero carbon, and resilience as the only outcomes that are possible, and let companies compete to meet those outcomes. Now, hopefully, Scotland is an example. Other governments would come in and set those conditions as well, and that's where companies can compete to. But it's a bit more complicated than that. It's a dance between innovators and investors and governments as they set these new conditions, as we create something totally new. So I hope that all of you will get involved with Energy Unlocked. We're going to finalize our challenges in the coming weeks. Please do get in touch and get involved. Don't delay. And enjoy your evening. A toast to everyone. Thank you so much for the support from Dr. McLeod Nancy Fund, Sarah Bell, and Anil Raj tonight. Thank you.